Remember that on our approach on the English section, 4 passages, 35 minutes. So each passage about 11 questions. You got about 8 to 9 minutes per passage. Um, if you completed this particular um, passage that I ask you to do in the exercise that I suggest you do, remember you're ready. Looking at the questions, the underlying portion first, reading the sentence the underlying portion contains, necessary the sentence around it, and then try various answer choices, see which one makes sense if you need to respond, or rhetorical, saving those for last, the more difficult questions. So let's do this passage as I suggested in the assignment. The passage is questions 12 through 22. The Crusading Cartoonist, Thomas Nast. So I'm talking about the something about Boss Tweed. Ryerson became famous for cartoons that called for reforms to an end to corruption. So the first question is asking you some sort of strategy, a transition word. Would we need a transition word there? So we might have to go back and read the previous sentence. Tweed once used those words when ordering someone to offer bride to Thomas Nast, and others who had become famous for cartoons that called for reforms to end corruption. Tweed's attempts to silence the artist failed, and Nast cartoons published in magazines like Harper's Weekly actually played a key role in bringing Boss Tweed and his cronies to justice. So if we try different ones as a result, that doesn't make any sense. As a result, it's the result of the silence. Therefore, no. Furthermore, no. So there's nothing. Delete the underlying portion. So the question is again coming back to: do we really need that there? You still delete that? No. So we decide, well, it makes sense without it there. So Tweed's attempt to silence, we really don't need a transition there. So that's a strategy type of question. Number 13, which choice most effectively combines the underlying sentence? These can be a little more difficult because sometimes they ask you for an integrated transition. And when I first approached this, I thought I was looking for an integrated transition as well. But it's asking you to think about which sentence is the most concise. Well, powerful political organizations in the 1860s and 1870s started taking control of the city governments, and they were known as political machines. Is that concise? No. And look at the no choice. The no. Well, no. It says again, not giving us an option for no change. So we know right away that this sentence here is not effective, and it tells us this. Known as political machines in the 1860s and 1870s. No. The political organizations were powerful. Too many commas here. City governments were taking control in the 1860s and 1870s. A powerful political organizations known as political machines did so. No, in the 1860s and 70s, powerful political organizations known as political machines started taking control of city governments. There's our most concise sentence. It sets up a dependent clause time frame and then gives us an independent clause. So concise sentence structure. There, D is our best choice. And remember, we just go through it and trying the different answer choices and deciding that those other ones don't work. 14, these political machines were best able to pack legislatures. I'm going right to the underlying portion in the sentence it contains. Of course, with handpicked supporters by purchasing votes. Votes, a form of election fraud involving the exchange of money or favors for votes. Votes being a form, votes that is a form, votes which it is. By purchasing votes. So it's, in this, the part after the comma is a clause that further describes the purchasing of votes. So we don't we if I'm reading it, it makes sense just to have no need for any additional word there. So this is a punctuation a type of question along with and sentence structure, understanding how a dependent clause works in this context. So punctuation and a little bit of a sentence structure here type of question, use of commas, and then also a modifier, right? Some sort of what's our best modifier here? Sometimes my screencast goes a little slow in sentence structure and actually, to be more specific, use of a modifier here. So, moving on. Number 15. Boss tweets Tammany Hall Group, which controlled New York City in the 1860s. Now you've got a comma here at the beginning, and then this is a dependent clause, which further explains that. Offsets and further explains that clause. If you need help with more help with some of those, you could go into the Khan Academy. But we don't need which controlled New York City in the 1860s. We just need another comma here because it's offset with a comma. So that hyphen usually you don't use unless you either have one at the beginning of a sentence or one that continues the sentence, but you see a comma with another dependent clause or a clause that describes the Tammany Hall Group. You wouldn't have a comma and a colon, or a hyphen. So we would have just two commas here that describes the Tammany Hall Group. So in punctuation, comma, or we could look at this as well as a excuse me, modifier type of question as well. Modifying phrase, right? Use of a modifying phrase. So then here we go into a rhetorical type of question, asking us about a structure, an author choice here. Should the author add or use this type of question? So this is a strategy type of question. Should the author use this particular question? Or these are known as yes, no type of questions. So the answer then is, thinking about this as the PDF is thinking, the writer is considered deleting the underlined sentence should the sentence be kept. Tweed had been elected to a single 2-year term. Well, it's talking about how he was into corruption and stole more than 30 million, the equivalent more than 365 million today, and then continues to talk about Tammany Hall on how it was so corrupt and powerful. It has something to do with Congress. So that's probably extraneous. Should it be deleted? Yes. So does it blur the focus by introducing loosely related information? Probably. Deleted because it contains information that undermines the main claim. Well, it doesn't really undermine the main claim, but it really doesn't really relate. So C is our best response here. 17. It was so powerful and corrupt, underlined portion, that the New York Times commented. Notice how I didn't pause there. So I didn't need those commas. And that sentence structure was so powerful and corrupt. The New York Times commented, but I need a comma before commented because I'm introducing a quote. So that's why C is my best response here. 18, a Nast's cartoon depicted Tweed as a great big bloated thief, one of the artist's most famous images. Now, if I start looking at 18, famous and well-known, famous and commonly known, famous, commonly known, I immediately can see that it's asking me about conciseness or redundancy. So I would go to famous images because it would be the most concise. Famous and well-known are really, the same thing, right? Famous and well-known, famous and commonly known. Those are really the same thing. So I only need famous here. Famous images show Tweed with a big bag of money in place of his head. 19. Which choice adds the most relevant supporting information to the paragraph? Head, like many of Nast's cartoons, the one that published Harper Weekly, relevant information, supporting information. That doesn't really support very well. Nast would later illustrates Tweed escape from prison. That doesn't support anything. Head, one depiction that omits Tweed's signature hat. We didn't really talk about a signature hat, but we're talking about his greedy nature, right? So head, an image that perfectly captures Tweed's greedy nature. So which strategy, which connection, connecting ideas here would work. So the strategy, again, most relevant supporting information. That's what we're looking for. And the most relevant supporting information, of course, is talking about his greed. So that's why D works best there. Number 20. So I'm just going to next campaign to bring down Tweed. I might read this quickly. Tammany Hall candidates greatly weakening Tweed's power. A bunch of Tweed and his gang were, so notice how I kind of read that fast and then got down to the meat of what I needed to get to. And if I need to come back to that, if the rhetorical question asks me to, I can. Eventually, Tweed and his gang were persecuted on number of charges. Well, you wouldn't say persecuted, right? Persecuted with a number of charges or prosecuted. Prosecuted is the word we want here. So verb choice and idioms, right? What's the word? Prosecuted on a number of charges. Prosecuted would be on a number of charges, including fraud and larceny. The correct way of saying it, you would say persecuted, you say prosecuted. Here. 21, Tweed escaped from jail and fled to Spain and unwittingly brought about one final pinnacle. So brings, has brought. So that we know immediately is some sort of verb tense question. Well, Tweed escaped from jail, so we're in the past tense, and fled, past tense, to Spain and unwillingly brought. So no change is our best response because we want to keep parallel construction, right? We want, it's straight past tense. Escaped from jail, fled to Spain, and unwillingly brought one final pinnacle the power of political cartoons. One final pinnacle, triumph of the power of political cartoons, culmination, or apex. So what's our best choice here? Probably one final triumph, right, of the power of political cartoons. One final pinnacle. We're talking about triumph. We're talking about greed, overcoming greed. So our best choice here in this idiom is probably triumph. A Spanish police officer recognized Tweed for one of NASCAR cartoons. So some victory over nailing him. He was sent back to jail. Nass was hailed as a man who toppled the great Tammany Hall machine. So we know in the context, even if we're not sure, go back and look at the rest of the context. We know based on the rest of the context of the sentence that triumph would probably be our best response here to this question. So that gets us through this particular passage. Notice I was using the strategy read, saving rhetorical questions or evaluating them for last if necessary. If I saw no change, I would consider whether to omit it, respond, and then I would try various answer choices if necessary. And and I looked at the sentences around it if it was necessary. Sometimes I would go through them fast, but I would get right to the underlined portion first and then go through the sentences around it if needed to, trying various answer choices, evaluating the rhetorical ones, making sure that I read the question carefully. And I wouldn't want to spend anywhere in 8.5 to 9 minutes on it. So hopefully you're getting a better understanding for tackling the writing language section and modeling how to go about it. Hopefully you got quite a few right. You can keep going back through practice test 5 if you wish.